Good morning, everybody. This is Luke James, Director and Head of Strategy at Impact Mobility. Apologies, starting a few minutes late. I had a slight hitch just on the technical side at our end, so apologies for that. Good afternoon and good evening to those of you in Europe, and good afternoon and good morning to those across North America. Really excited for the next 45 minutes to an hour of what we're going to talk around, which is focusing really on the west coast of the states and looking at Sacramento. Initially with SACOG, which is the area council of governments, which covers a much broader area than Sacramento itself, and then actually looking at the city of Sacramento thereafter. The next piece of this will be looking at how investments are happening in the mobility space and what cities and private companies are really looking at in making this happen. So we're going to start off now. I can see there's a few people still joining the room, but initially it is Monica Hernandez, who is the Director of Innovation and Partnerships at SACOG. So we are going to turn to Monica very shortly. So thank you, Monica.
And the team at Thank you, Luke, and thank you to your team at Impact Mobility. This is Monica Hernandez with the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. I'm thrilled to share some of my lessons learned, our agency's lessons learned, and talk a little bit about what our agency has been doing to reduce barriers for public-private partnerships around innovative mobility. Our challenge-first approach to those pilot projects and tests, meaning how we work to get a challenge solved in our region, and then definitely going to talk about our lessons learned, which they are many. So for a bit of background for everybody tuning in, SACOG, the Sacramento Area Council of Governments region, is in Northern California. We are 6 counties, 22 cities. We serve both as a metropolitan planning organization and a council of governments. For those of you who know, I'm not going to go into the details for today's audience. We have about 2.4 million residents, and our communities range in population from 800 to 500,000. So we've gone through quite a change of approach in the last few years. And our board of directors, which is 31 elected officials in the region, really we started with why now, what was happening. So we really wanted to talk and dive deep onto what triggered our changes in approach to launching programs like Civic Lab and our Transportation Demand Management Innovations Grant. Technology is changing rapidly and creating a lot of opportunities, also creating challenges, increased ride sharing, increased vehicle sharing, the opportunity to leverage all of these for first and last mile connections to transit, thereby expanding the reach of the transit system that is already across the region and what we've been investing in. And then, of course, mobility as a service coming on. And we really want to be able to play a role in the development of MOS and how it can serve our community. But in a nutshell, we really are focused on moving people in new and efficient ways, connecting to our existing options, including our transit system, our regional fare transfer card, and then investments that we've already made around transportation demand management. And ultimately, we want to reduce vehicle miles traveled in our region and greenhouse gas emissions. So in the state of California, we have some additional statute beyond federal guidance on greenhouse gas reductions from the vehicle sector. And SACOG is responsible for planning the expenditure of state and federal dollars, and in doing that, also demonstrating how we will continue to reduce VMT. So looking at what we did, we have been investing in infrastructure for a long time, and we have been working with transportation demand management. So transportation demand management is about changing behavior, raising the efficiency of the existing system, and again, reducing vehicle miles traveled as a key outcome. So we have new products, services, and technology, and a lot of disruption that is actually changing how people move around without any of the influence from the work that SACOG has been doing and other agencies just like us around the country. And so bringing those together is the nexus that we see for advancing innovative mobility with the type of funding and governmental guidance that we have. So I'm going to talk about one of our programs, Civic Lab, and this was something that we launched in 2017. It really was intended to be a pilot project. It came out of this idea of a regional leadership academy around innovation and mobility. And just diving into that idea, we had a lot of internal debate and discussion that what was that going to solve for our region? Was that the right solution? And through lots of iteration and feedback loops, we discovered that we didn't think we were actually solving the problems that we wanted to. So we developed this program called Civic Lab, and it was for our region a first of its kind accelerator where city and counties formed teams. They applied with a mobility challenge that they were trying to solve, and then we took them through a cohort process for a 9-month period. One of the early learnings is when we put this program together, we had a 12-month curriculum. We put a lot of staff time, a lot of resources into planning what we thought was really effective. Like good employees and planners, we also created evaluations for each of the sessions. And we learned very quickly that what we had planned ahead wasn't the real issues that our agencies were having. And I'll dive into that in a little bit. So our board, partway through our process, so again, this was a pilot project, only our staff time was funded. So halfway through, after we had brought in the private sector and some new mobility providers, our board invested $1 million to develop pilot projects. And that actually leveraged another over $1 million for our various pilot projects. So in that first cohort, here's some of the projects that we've launched. One autonomous vehicle shuttle demonstration project at Sac State University. We had microtransit shuttles in different types of communities, interestingly in rural communities. One was a congestion relief project in an agritourism area, suburban bike share, which has been very challenging. Some on the phone may know that we have jump bikes in 3 of our more urban cities, and we are trying to look at how we can change travel behavior in some of the outerlying areas. So jumping into our lessons learned. So regional readiness, what does that mean? Where is our buy-in from the top? Are we going to have support when we are saying, you know what, we're going to go out, we're going to do a pilot, and it may fail? What are we going to do with that failure? And that's a very non-traditional space, an uncomfortable space for the government to be. It can be perceived as bad oversight, misuse of funds. And so this was a big shift for us. We also learned that technical assistance for our cities and counties was really important. And that technical assistance not only comes from SACOG staff, but it also comes from the private sector. So building that up is really important. And that also ties into procurement, which we learned that procurement was a huge barrier to attracting private investment in our region around pilot projects. If it takes 8 months to develop a contract to launch a pilot, we were losing interest right away. So to kind of sum that up, if you have Sandra Bullock as your project manager, you really want Rihanna as your procurement and your contract staff. Language really mattered. Again, having a streamlined procurement process that is challenge-based, again, going back to what our challenge first statement was. So through Civic Lab, each of the teams went through an iterative process to get to the core root of the problem that they were trying to solve. What was the mobility issue? Is it vehicles at an agritourism site? Is it getting access to healthcare services in a rural community? Is it moving students from a light rail station to campus, or is the bigger issue intercampus circulation? So with that, we honed in on these challenge statements. We provided pitch training and assistance to all of our teams, and then we actually got feedback from private vendors to come in and actually help frame the pilot projects so that we were able to provide use cases that could be of interest to the private sector. So again, the private sector is getting something from the public side. And here's just a sampling of some of the partners that we've been working with on our pilot projects. And then, of course, having ongoing funding is an issue. Fat stacks of money always help. That's not realistic. But again, our board put in $1 million. We've leveraged over more than $1 million back from the private sector. And we're getting ready to launch another autonomous vehicle demonstration project, another microtransit project. Our suburban bike share pilot projects are going to launch in a couple of years, or excuse me, a couple more months. And that's going to be something that we're really looking forward to learning from. So right now where we are with these pilot projects are gathering the results and determining if there is a next version of the pilot with some iteration, or if there is opportunity to scale, or if it was a not successful pilot project, and understand why those pilot projects didn't work and see what other changes we might need to make in either a land use or infrastructure state for the region. So looking ahead, what we're going to do next, building on this first mobility focus of Civic Lab, is wanting to stand up this essentially a 2.0 based a lot on the lessons learned. So if you look at the top right of the screen, that really is kind of the focus of year one for Civic Lab. And we want to take things that we know were very successful, and then other things that we thought were kind of opportunities lost. Opportunities lost were things like building our region's capacity. So when we brought in technical experts from around the country to consult with our teams from the private sector, from the public sector, from academia, there really was a lost opportunity in not elevating the access to all of that knowledge. And we really are on a path to building our region as a test bed for mobility solutions coming from a challenge first place. And then, of course, we want to continue to leverage what we know works well with public-private partnerships. The pace in which the private sector can work and test and iterate is something that we are working to align with, and we're getting a lot of really positive feedback. There's great opportunity for the problems that our region is facing today, and particularly in our smaller and rural communities. There aren't the resources to alone attract a private mobility provider or a technology provider. Sometimes our communities are dealing with issues of connectivity. So to think that there's going to be an autonomous vehicle demonstration project, and they're not going to go out and try to recruit that. They're focused on local needs. So we're able to help bridge that gap so that some communities aren't left behind. And then, of course, we want to continue to do demonstration projects and pilot projects. And one more kind of lesson learned that I know we will be better at in this next iteration is setting up clear performance metrics for pilot projects at the front end, and ownership and data sharing. And with that, I'm going to stop. I think I went a minute over time.
Awesome. Thank you, Monica. I think that's fantastic. It gives a great picture. Lots of projects. The pilots is the key word here. And I guess the next step is going to be really interesting for all involved. The next person we're going to hear from, who I touched on earlier, is Louis Stewart, who is the Chief Innovation Officer for the City of Sacramento. Louis is key in the urban technology lab and all the great tech projects they are bringing out of Sacramento, or bringing into, I should say. So, Lewis, hello, good morning, and we'd love to hear more from you.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. And it's a pleasure to be part of this webinar, and look forward to being part of future conversations. I appreciate you including us. Just contextually, let's start with stating one of our biggest selling points is Sacramento. Sacramento is the capital of the fifth largest economy in the world. But oftentimes, as the capital of such a big economy, we aren't considered in the world economy. So if you look at other capitals, London, Rome, you don't hear Sacramento in that conversation. And so when I came on board in 2017, a lot of the focus in Sacramento was around changing the city's perception and creating and turning it into a destination city. So the mindset with everything that we started working on out of the innovation unit is really, how do you make Sacramento a destination, one that can grow talent and grow businesses, retain talent and retain businesses, but then also use it as a platform to develop an ecosystem that can actually attract talent and businesses. One big way of doing that, and you heard Monica mention a little bit, is being able to move at the speed of business. So we have a very nimble team. There's 3 of us and a couple interns. And basically what we're trying to do is transform the city into a living laboratory, where demonstrations are possible, where we can actually turn contracting around in 2 months to do demonstrations, so it doesn't fall into that procurement trap that Monica spoke about. Some of our procurements take a little bit longer, but the city adopted what's called a demonstration partnership pilot agreement. So that allows us to walk around the edges of the standard procurement process and get into some of these contracting methodologies faster. The city also has invested in innovation through what's called the RAILS program, which is a $1 million grant program. So there's all the bits and pieces and ingredients to make a good recipe. And our job is really to start pulling it together to make it work. And being able to speak about Sacramento very differently than you've heard Sacramento spoken about before. So historically, Sacramento has been looked down upon as just a government town and a pass between as you go to Tahoe or you have access to the Bay Area. So our job within the innovation unit is really to make people understand that it is a place that you actually want to be. There's actually opportunities here because it is a government town. And if we can build a true triple helix here in Sacramento and the region, we can actually use the government town moniker as a strength-based look. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the triple helix, it really is about industry, government, and academia working together to create an innovation ecosystem. And that's the basis for what we're calling the Sacramento Urban Technology Lab. And Sacramento as an urban technology lab, what does that mean? Sacramento can right now be defined by our food, our art, and our appetite for cutting-edge technology. We're known as America's farm to fork capital because of our position at the heart of one of the largest food production centers in the world. Our creative economy is on the rise. And now that Sacramento is stepping into a knowledge-based economy, we're engaging with stakeholders across the region's innovation ecosystem to create a framework that's transforming the city into a type of research city, where future technologies can be developed, tested, and scaled. The Sacramento Urban Technology Lab, or SUTTLE as we call it, is that framework. SUTTLE brings together government, business, and our academic institutions in a way that we can collaborate to solve real-world problems, focused really around evidence-based policy, applied research, demonstrations, and workforce development, all to accelerate the quality of life improvements. As emergent technologies such as autonomous cars, artificial intelligence, and the Internet of Things continue to show promise of transforming society, we want to make sure that Sacramento, as the capital of the world's fifth largest economy, is not only poised to be a leader and is at the forefront of grasping the implications, but also begins to influence their path. So as we take a step back, we needed to project what Sacramento was going to be known for, what we are known for historically, where our strengths lie, but also aspirationally where we want it to go. And at the same time, the city is undertaking an inclusive growth strategy process. So under the Sacramento Urban Technology Lab, we're aimed at supporting inclusive growth in mobility, clean tech and sustainability, health, IT, and life science, food systems, IoT, cybersecurity, government on the evidence-based policy side and civic tech, and workforce development. And Sacramento has a unique competitive advantage with opportunities in these and other high-growth industries that can attract capital investment and create the jobs of the future. So really subtle gives us a framework to go out and talk to companies and go out and talk to investors, go in and bring in other academic institutions as we look at building out our aging corridors, as we look at supporting projects like what UC Davis is doing here around life science with Aggie Square. But in this case, we're talking about mobility. So Sacramento was a recipient of $44 million of Electrify America dollars. So there's great projects happening in and around the city around electric vehicles and charging. Our regional transit system is doing some amazing work, and SACOG is right there as a partner supporting all of these things. We decided to stake our claim officially back in April of 2017 in the autonomous car space with a platform called AUTOS, ATOS. It stands for Autonomous Transportation Open Systems, Open Standards, sorry. And, we put it out to the world that we wanted autonomous car companies to look at Sacramento, again, as a living lab. Once you graduate from a test bed, come to Sacramento and we can get you onto the street so that you can actually start working on the hearts and minds of the citizens, not just doing tech for tech's sake. So we can actually get you out into the communities so that community members can engage. We talk to businesses about doing show and tells at schools so the kids understand that this new technology and technology adjacent companies are reality. They're not just fiction that you see on the screen. And so, in the context of the global economies, EVs, electric vehicles, and autonomous vehicles are really what's next when you start talking about smart cities. Yes, you have the infrastructure, you have obviously your cell phones and other consumables. But if we don't figure out how to move people, we aren't truly affecting the health and wealth of our citizens. So that has led to several conversations. The conversation that brought Local Motors to Sacramento ended up in partnership with SACOG. The partnership that brought Phantom Auto to Sacramento, and it was the first of a kind partnership for them as well with the city. But it's also leading to technology adjacent companies like Reviver, which is a digital license plate company, or Ample, which is an autonomous robot operated charging system that our city's fleet is going to be testing out later this year. And so with Phantom, they're really helping us put our theory to the test because we believe that ultimately if we can move at the speed of business, then our customers will be happy. And our customers are the universities, our industry folks, but then also the regulators that are here, because if we can actually build stuff here in Sacramento that they can actually see, touch, feel, and understand, then we get to a better place for evidence-based policy. And all this is done working in parallel with SACOG, working in parallel with the universities, working in parallel with other stakeholders around the region. But ultimately, we're trying to build a showcase because all the regulators sit here for 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, and we want them to be able to experience these new technologies firsthand. And when they go back to their constituents in their various districts around the state, one, they can parrot the great things that are coming out of Sacramento, but now they can actually start talking about it in their communities and getting people to understand the job development or workforce development implications. We understand that there's an inherent fear around job loss when you talk about automation, especially in mobility. But we've done a lot of work here in Sacramento to lay out what jobs are actually coming and being created by these autonomous companies and autonomous adjacent companies, so that we can walk into the community with confidence and be able to talk about if a fleet service of autonomous cars come out, what kind of jobs, what kind of implications on the environment, and also let people know that we're still learning alongside these companies. We're still learning alongside the community to help everybody understand and get on the same page language-wise with what's expected when you come to Sacramento. It's not just doing tech for tech's sake, but it really is about helping the community as a whole. If we can get people to doctors, if we can get people to jobs, if we can get children to the after-school programs and so their parents can work and relieve that stress, let's figure out what those systems look like, and let's continue to bring companies here. We called our platform Autonomous Transportation Open Standard because we wanted to be in the standard-setting conversation. Not to claim that Sacramento in and of itself is special and should be able to set standards, but to enter into the conversation with SAE, with IEEE, with other jurisdictions, so that we can really truly look at how to not create a patchwork of regulations around autonomous cars. When you bring companies here and you can walk them into the Department of Motor Vehicles, you can walk them into the PUC, you can walk them into the state capitol and have a conversation with legislators. But also when they're coming to Sacramento and they're greeted by our mayor, by our council members, by our congresswoman, it gives a different feel that companies don't get in other cities throughout the state. Understanding that a lot of the investment is still not in Sacramento. But again, we fall back on that customer experience. So we want to make sure that we don't fall into the procurement trap and we leverage the tools that we actually have here on hand. But then we also, essentially open ourselves up to other technologies. And I know you guys are about to hear from Chan, but that's one of the ways that this subtle framework is actually evolving. Now we are in conversations with several venture capital companies that are looking at our verticals because we stated them very clearly and considering us as an innovation partner and potentially sending projects or companies our way. And then our job and our mentality is we have to make sure that we take care of them as a customer so that then the VCs are satisfied with what we're doing. And look at Sacramento again as a place where they want to send more companies. So as these companies come to the city, we want to make sure that they're treated with respect. We don't take them through, 8-month process so that, we connect them with the universities. So for instance, with Local Motors, it was important to get them connected with Sac State because engineering students all of a sudden got firsthand experience working on level 5 autonomous shuttle and working on some of the engineering with the team from Local Motors. With Phantom Auto, we made sure that they did a few demonstrations on campus at Sac State, but also in front of the Capitol, and so that we can get a couple of assembly members in the car so they understood what the technology was and wasn't. The fantastic part about that is the assembly members saw it as an opportunity to teach their children. So they actually brought their children to experience it. I take every opportunity, and this is, personal plug, to bring my kids pretty much everywhere I go to do things so that they can then tell their friends about their experiences. And for us, really, it really comes down to that inclusive growth mentality, awareness building within communities that are historically underrepresented in this space, but also have the biggest need. And then access and opportunity. So let's really talk about what does it truly take to build the jobs to create this living laboratory, not knowing everything that's coming. But if we can focus on those 7 verticals, from mobility to clean tech to life science and beyond, let's truly start building the capacity within our city and our region to support these jobs of the future. That will not only differentiate us as a city and as a region, but it actually helps us grow. There is an immense pool of ambitious and eager citizens here in Sacramento, but they're also a little wary. So we have to be good partners to the citizens. We have to be good partners to our stakeholders, and we have to truly work on the marriage between the two Sacramentos, Sacramento City and Sacramento State, to do the evidence-based policy that's going to benefit our citizens. And so we're going to continue to push in the mobility space. We're actually having competitions. We're actually having conversations with Las Vegas, with Gomentum down in Contra Costa, and a few other jurisdictions about now starting to share operational design domain conversations so that we can actually enter into that standard setting conversation like many other states are with NHTSA, with IEEE, with SAE, and formalized partnerships here in California that can actually begin to put Sacramento and others across the state equal playing field with some of the other global leaders. And with that, I end. I look forward to questions at the end of the conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lewis. I think it's really interesting insight. A quick just administration point to all those listening. We've got a couple of questions come through. There's a question tab you should see on a go-to webinar on the right-hand side. So any questions posted in there, not in the chat functions, it won't work. There's been a couple around sort of private innovation companies and how they propose to cities and how does that work. And I think that actually leads and segues quite nicely into Chon, who will tell us more about his role, I guess, with Berkeley and Skydeck and how they work with enterprising companies across all sectors, but critically in mobility. So, Chon, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, Luke.
Good morning, Chon. We're going to share the screen now, so it's just coming over. Okay.
I see it now, so I'm going to go ahead and hit share, and hopefully everybody can see my screen, my slides. Are we good?
Yep, you're good. Fantastic. Over to you, Chon.
Wonderful. So I have the opportunity to be at the same event. Both of us were on panels back in, I believe, January, February with Lewis. And as I heard him talk about sort of his pain points and his priorities, I was kind of amazed because, what I'm going to go through a broader introduction in terms of what we do and how we do it. But as someone who invests in more than 40 early companies each year, I'm very aware of what the pain points are that our founders face, and the kind of opportunity that Lewis is offering through the Innovation Lab is exactly the answer to their prayers. And that sounds a little bit like a exaggeration, and perhaps it is, but it's certainly, as we go down the list of what will it take to unlock that next round of funding, as we go down the list of what is it that they need to achieve in the next 3 to 9 months, this is it. And the fact that he was presenting it as if he had to convince founders to come to Sacramento, especially in the context of the triple helix and more, I was quite honestly in shock, and that convinced me that we really need to have more of these sort of bilateral conversations and really build a platform that makes it possible to connect both sides of this gap, because there must be a gap for someone like Lewis to really think that he needs to convince our companies to engage. They're looking for exactly this kind of a partnership. All right, enough about that. I'm going to jump into a brief background about what we do right here at Berkeley Skydeck, and then a bit more about our thoughts and how we engage around this particular vertical. So in brief, we are the official accelerator for UC Berkeley. For those who think they know exactly what that means, if you went back to 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, you would have been correct. This would have looked like the type of a campus accelerator that you see in hundreds of campuses here in the U.S. and in thousands of campuses around the world. But I will drop a hint and say that as I go through a more in-depth explanation of the function that we serve, you will see that this is not quite the old model, that we are truly unique in the value that we provide. We're truly unique in terms of the companies that we're able to unlock and get access to, and our presence, our weight, both here in the ecosystem in the Bay Area is quite exciting. So in brief though, about how we actually function, we run a accelerator cohort. So for those of you who know about YC or 500 or Techstars, it is that kind of a model. It's a 6-month long program. Everybody comes in on the same day. They leave on the same day at our demo day. That's the point where they're really pitching to the outside world with hundreds of investors in attendance. It's a 6-month long program. We do have 2 tracks, the full cohort. So these are the 40 companies every year that we invest in. And then there's also the hot desk companies. That's more of the early stage incubator for our campus community. Most of the conversation, most of the time that we invest here is on the full cohort. So those are the companies that we believe are really on the cusp of being able to raise that institutional round. And our track record on that front is quite good. More than half, close to 2/3 of our full cohort companies historically have been able to go on and raise from institutional investors. To get into our program, so historically, the only way in, as you would probably expect, is if you are affiliated to UC Berkeley and perhaps some of the other UC campuses. That was its original role. Our function was to help faculty and alumni, et cetera, take their technology and take that talent and find a way to commercialize it. But that, in my mind, is not special enough. So that's where the Global Acceleration program comes in, and I will talk a bit more about that in a little bit. And I apologize for the pinging in the background. I have an app in the background that's doing that. And and the fund that I am the GP for invest $100,000 in each of these full cohort companies on day one. It's not conditional to their progress. It's really meant to be capital to enable them to go on and grow. And by the time they leave our program, again, more than half, close to 2/3 of them are going to raise somewhere in the 1 to 3 million, 1 to 3 million range, and they're really going to be able to pursue their dreams and their plans. So briefly, we're right here in downtown Berkeley. It's a physical accelerator, unlike some of the programs that exist. That is more of a virtual program. We are, because the founders that we're focused on, we're all about company construction. So they work from our space here in the penthouse in the tallest building in downtown Berkeley. And what they get while they're here is, at the minimum, you're going to get 180 advisors. These are some of the biggest names in the Valley. We have the CEOs of DoorDash. We have the CEO and co-founders of Lime. That's going to come up again, of course, because that's very important in this context. Also includes the co-founders of Tesla, Mark Tarpenning, lots of investors and more, and a lot of them are, of course, are giving back because they are Cal alums. In addition to that, we do have access to tools from our partners, including legal, tax, and more. It's a very competitive program. This number is actually a little bit outdated. For this most recent cohort, we had 850 companies apply, and we only picked 20 of them. So it's probably sub 3% at this point. And the board of directors for the program still consists of the Dean of Engineering, the College of Engineering, and the Vice Chancellor for Research. That's just really meant to re-emphasize that we really are very, very embedded at its core as a campus program. But let me talk about why what we do is truly, truly unique and interesting. The GAP program is something that only we have, and I think only something that we are able to execute effectively. When we went out to build this fund and build this program, we realized that there was a group of very skilled founders, very talented, that everyone in the Valley, from investors to other founders to customers, who would all agree and say, man, these folks they have it. They are skilled. They have every shot of building the next billion-dollar company. But at the end of the day, they're undervalued to a certain degree. They're uninvestable. And why is that? Who are these founders? Well, these are founders from outside of the U.S. For the investors in the audience, I know they will agree with me. For 95% of the VCs in the Valley, they're not able to invest in that kind of a company. They'll go down that list and say, oh boy, it's a great problem that they're solving. It's a great technology that they've built. They have some customer traction. Everything looks fabulous. But once they get to that team slide and they understand that they have no context on the founders, where they went to school, where they've worked, what companies they might have built in the past, they lose all ability to evaluate the ability of these folks to execute here as in the Bay Area. So for that reason alone, the vast majority of foreign founders are in effect not able to plug in into this very powerful ecosystem. And why do they want to plug into this ecosystem? Well, in brief, I think there's three key reasons. They want the access to talent, they want access to capital, but the most important one, and I think it's incredibly important in this context, it's the access to the markets. This is the only place where it's perfectly normal for customers, for enterprises, and for governments to want to purchase a product from a company that didn't exist a year ago and could very well be bankrupt in 1 year, right? So as the previous two panelists talked about, it's not a consideration how established this company is. They just want to know how innovative, how disruptive, and how valid their approach is. So we make it possible for that class of project to come to the Valley and to thrive. Lots of access to our faculty on campus. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that. Our alumni include Lime, of course, which came through 2.5 years ago and is now worth much more than $2 billion. That is probably from about 6 months ago. Now they're on $3 to $4 billion. Investors in the fund include some of the biggest names in venture because they understand this pain point. They understand that we are tapping into extremely talented people, and they want to see our companies grow. And because of this view into the venture world, we have some insights into what works in engagement with government and what investors want to see, because they really are the enablers of the growth of these companies, and what they don't want to see. So about that briefly, as I see it, I think there's been three giant waves of opportunity in this whole ecosystem, right? So that first wave, that's the Ubers and the Lyfts, right? We're talking about $100 billion in enterprise value because those two companies have gone public. If we add Didi in China, it's even larger. This really at the heart of it has been about eliminating car ownership, making it possible to car share and ride share. And there's still, of course, additional opportunities in that ecosystem. But what I think is really exciting is over the last 3 years, we've now seen the next wave. So the next wave has been all about, okay, well, now if commuters don't own their cars anymore, well, what else needs to exist, right? Uber and Lyft solve that sort of 1 to 5 kilometer drive problem. Well, then what is going to come in and solve the sub 1 kilometer problem? Now that I don't own a car, how am I going to get to restaurants? Now we're seeing Lime and Jump and Uber Eats. These are all platforms that have become increasingly important. But I think we're still in the early days of that. I think 10 years after the creation of this wave, the enterprise value of the companies in that ecosystem is going to be worth significantly more than $100 billion. So I don't see it as the opportunities have been exhausted. Far from it. I think the first wave enabled the next wave, but we're really seeing a huge change in behavior that's going to translate into tremendous wealth. And the third wave, which we're starting to see the cusp of, so we're investing in a lot of these companies that are going through our accelerator now. It's the guys that fill in the gaps. It's the providers of data and analytics and more. For example, we have a company that's all about connecting public transit with the Limes and the Jumps and the Uber Eats, right? So if I want to go from point A to point B, well, I'm not going to use only the bus system, or I'm going to use the BART system. I need to figure out how that's going to connect with Lime. Am I confident that there's a Lime at the destination I'm going to? People need to solve those problems. We don't know the size of that yet, but I also think it's going to be huge. Let me talk about the venture view. I'm not positive how much time I have left, but I'm going to breeze through this fast so we can get into some Q&A. What we learned from the venture side is that it's much better to ask for forgiveness than permission, right? If you look at Uber and Lyft and even Lime, they've won by breaking the rules. They've grown quickly by ignoring what it would have taken to get permission to engage with government, and basically said, all I care about is the consumer, and it's work. They go out there, they build products that solve a core pain point. To some degree, they're not even concerned about how they monetize the consumers. They're focused on one thing and one thing only. What problem do people have that makes them addicted, tied, habitually based on our platform and engaging with us every single day? And it turns out in the venture view, that is the right way to win, because you have companies that can grow rapidly. And just one quick anecdote on how quickly that is growing. There was a point where Lime had raised at a $1 billion pre. I think it was early June of last year. And a month later, they were raising at a $2 billion pre. And why is that? Well, because adoption and usage of their platform had doubled in 1 month. And you only get that to happen by focusing on consumers and having a creative interpretation of the law. And I'm sure our partners are not necessarily appreciating that view of it, because they're the ones that are end up holding the bag and trying to figure out how to deal with the consequences. But from the venture point of view, this is a good thing, right? And then from the investor view, we're not picking companies based on what we think is a good idea. There is this sort of, I think, a common myth that that's what happens. You have people who are brilliant who hang out in cafes and hear pitch decks and kind of say, hey, your prediction of the future is the right one, I'm going to back you. In reality, the most compelling thing that investors are watching for is who's growing the fastest. I think we all have a vision of what the future is going to be. So who's executing on it? This is not something that someone convinces you of. It's something that someone shows you. They just give you the data of engagement usage, and those are the ones that will win, because those are the ones that investors will pour billions of investment into. All right, so that was the past, right? Rapid growth without consideration of consequences and the law. What is coming next? Well, it makes sense. I mean, this conversation is occurring because more and more we're seeing government involved. Then they have to be, because we're changing behavior, we are changing planning. Everything is in flux, and they're the ones that have to make sure that the populace will benefit from it, and no one is being punished by it. So at the same time, I really want to point out that VCs really don't like companies that sell to government. And this is actually a common misconception, because I've had conversations with people in transit agencies, in government, who almost feel like they have to warn me, like, oh, but the contracting process isn't very fast. I don't know that we have a budget for this. That's fine. This is a well-established context. Investors don't want companies that want to sell to government, because at least in the early days, because that process is so slow, we don't know who's going to win. What investors do want is faster iteration. We just want to be able to run experiments. We want a platform where a company can come in, have the free space to go out and meet their customers, provide that service, and figure out what's working and what's not, and then we can invest in the winners. My last slide, I promise. It's incredibly important now that we do have these government agencies in the loop, right? Because you guys are the ones that will help us enable. You're the referees. Don't be the buyers. I had a great company in this last cohort where multiple investors said, we love the team, we love everything about what they're building, but boy, they're selling to government. I'm going to pass. Okay, so for an early stage startup, of course, as they grow to a certain size, they do want to come in and bid and whatnot. But for an early stage startup, winning that contract is actually not a priority. It's all about experimentation and being the referee and enabling that experimentation. Get us access to the market participants. Get us access to your commuters. Get us access to your customers. That's all that we need. Unfortunately, everybody's bandwidth constrained. Everybody is concerned about bringing in a project that doesn't execute. Failure is a given in the venture world, right? More than half of the companies that we invest in will not make it anywhere. So that's why it's important to have a trusted partnership. I'm really excited to see where we can push that. We are going to learn a whole lot in this process, but I think it's the right thing to do and an important thing to do. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Luke.
Thank you, John. That was awesome. Thank you very much, and really interesting, particularly on how that's all grown from breaking rules to actually working and help create them. I think it's fascinating. We've got a lot of questions to come through, and now we've only got some time, so I will share the questions with all the panelists after this webinar, and they will hopefully, when they get time, come back and we can answer them for you then. But one that has come up frequently is, as a startup, and I guess this is to all of you, I suppose, but maybe Lewis first. But as a startup, what is the starting point or the first move to actually be involved and take part in some of the initiatives and POCs in Sacramento that have been mentioned so far?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And honestly, we try to get to a place, we start from a place of yes versus starting from a place of no. A lot of startups right now are contacting me directly via the social channels or somebody on the team. Every once in a while, we'll get a referral, like I said, from a venture capital. But then a lot of referrals are actually coming from the developing partnership with the Kings basketball team because they use their arena as a big incubator. So oftentimes they come across companies that can scale to a city, and so they refer them to us.
And Monica, if you're still there with the Civic Labs project, is it similar? Is it, or what's your process, I suppose, for finding them working with?
Sure. So we actually use it's a procurement. Now, I know what you just heard, but what we do is we list out our challenge statements and essentially ask for solution proposals. We currently have a live challenge right now on commercial corridor revitalization. If anybody who's interested, these are more land use focused. If you go to sacog.org under Do Business With Us, you can see our RFQ out there. But we actually put kind of the open call out for the solutions to help us solve our problems. And that's all done through our homepage, and then we use organizations to help us promote that via Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn.
Got you. Thank you, Monica. In fact, I've got a question just come in for John, which sort of made me chuckle, but I'll let you respond. So, John, do you see signs of the ventures understanding or accepting of their, in speech marks, villain role as disruptors and turning their thoughts to being a part of a larger ecosystem solution? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't see a lot of investors apologizing for what for what their role is. I think a lot of investors have this vision that they're enabling the future, and that even though people don't thank us now, they will thank us in 10 years. And so, but clearly, I think people understand that, again, there are consequences, and these consequences impact the outcome of our investments. So from that point of view alone, there is certainly a great deal of appreciation that we need to be more holistic in how we think about our investments and impact from a purely financial point.
Thank you, John. I think we lost the final part of that, but the answer was very good. I guess the closing one then, in sort of 15 seconds or less, and this is probably to Lewis and Monica first, but do you believe that municipalities will and are becoming more receptive to embracing shared economy smart city solutions?
Monica,
In less than 15 seconds, in less than 15 seconds, absolutely yes. And you have, kind of leading edge cities like Sacramento with Lewis and his team. And as I mentioned, we have a city of 800 residents that is really looking to be part of the ideation, the testing, the iterating, and deployment and scale. And cities and counties are reducing barriers to making that happen. Go ahead.
I would agree. A lot of the innovation now moving forward has to come from cities and the way that they interact with business in order to influence policy. So right now, I think more cities are turning to a process by which they can actually look at what's coming as opposed to letting things happen to them.
Fantastic. On that note, folks, I'm going to thank our panelists today, who've all been fantastic, so thank you. Round of applause. I will share the questions we haven't got through with them after this. The webinar has been recorded and will be sent to you later this week, and to the folk who've missed this. Lewis and Monica will both be speaking at Impact Mobility in San Diego on November 4th and 5th. We've got heaps of other public sector leaders and folk from the private sector, from OEMs, mobility service providers, and folk in the micro-transit space. So it should be a great couple of days, and please do come and join us, or at least keep engaging with the content we create. It's been an absolute pleasure today, and I thank you all, and we'll speak soon. Good day.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Cheers all. Thank you very much.